Well, hello, Justine. How we doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. Glad you could join. I'm glad that our friend that I'm forgetting her name, like we were just chatting about before on LinkedIn, got us in touch. What was her name again?
Amber.
Amber. Good. Yeah. So the context around this for anyone listening is that I posted basically it was a attempt at doing some product marketing like language for UserGems. And it was this grid that basically outlined a couple of the core capabilities and themes of messages, at least that I was seeing on UserGems website, plus ads. And so anyway, posted that out into LinkedIn, and then Amber saw it, and then now here we are talking. So pretty cool how that happens, right?
Yeah, and truthfully, and thanks for the reminder, when I had seen it, I said, oh, thank God I'm on the right track. Because I'm thrilled that the positioning that you had come up with for user gems was similar enough to the messaging and positioning that I have been working on for the last, like 10 or 11 months.
Yeah.
Um, so made me feel like it wasn't a complete failure.
Right, exactly. Well, it's always interesting because you have the idea, right, and you've got stuff in a spreadsheet or you've got stuff in a PowerPoint or wherever it lives, and then you put it out there, and then you're hoping that the perception of that is actually what you intended. So it's good that, at least for me, now I'm a little bit familiar with you guys because I've seen you all over the place, at least the last like handful of months, and your names come up a couple times too. Not you specifically, but User Gyms as a company around some just ads that people have really liked from you all that you guys have done. And so I didn't want to necessarily get into all things advertising, but I think what we want to chat about is more like product marketing and all things related to it. And I guess I'll give some context before we kind of jump into a couple of things. But one of the things that we always see, and we work with a lot of Series A to Series C B2B SaaS brands. And so we predominantly do paid for them, but product marketing is always one of the top issues for them. It's how do we get really clear on the message of exactly what you do and what the capability is of your tool? Because sometimes we get a little bit sidetracked into jumping immediately to we drive pipeline, we drive revenue, you can 3x your this, you can 2x your that, right? And then we're like looking at those ads or looking at the stuff on the landing page or wherever it is, and we're saying, well, wait a minute, what the heck does this thing actually do? How does it work? And give me some context around it. Because if you don't have that context, the benefit's kind of meaningless. And so I wanted to get your take though, because I think it's good to take a step back a little bit into like the world of product marketing, because everyone defines it differently. And some SaaS companies don't even have a product marketing team. UserGems is lucky to have you, and I assume there's some others on your team too that actually manage all that. But I wanted to get your take on like how you see product marketing and UserGems. Like, what are you guys doing? How do you guys keep that separated from sales and marketing? Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so flattered that you think that there's more than just me. It is actually just me. I am our only and first product marketer. And I
Uh-huh.
actually transitioned into this role from a customer success role.
Oh, killer! Nice.
So I joined UserGems as employee number like 10 or 11
Uh-huh.
and started in CS and then went into product marketing. And product marketing is really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It's different everywhere and it can be really nuanced. So
Mm-hmm.
it can really be used differently depending on like where you're as a company. Like, what does your product do? Do you work more with sales and enablement, or do you work like me, who I work primarily with our product team and
Mm-hmm.
not as closely with sales? So the way I kind of categorize product marketing is you're really the voice of market for your product team, but you're also the voice of your product to the market.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really this like two-way street of how am I going to make sure everyone in the market knows what my product is and how it benefits them and what problems we solve, but also how do we then influence the roadmap of what our product team is building to make sure we're not off track and just kind of building things that we
Mm-hmm.
think people want and problems that we think it can solve, but like that's not actually what anyone in the market wants us to build and it's not what anyone would buy. So it's
Right.
really this like two-way the silos of trying to figure out like how am I the voice of the market and how am I the
Mm.
voice of my product.
I like that. That puts it really simply. I mean, I think of things in categories too. Like, I mean, there's the messaging side of it, there's positioning, there's pricing, there's the way you package it and bundle things. Are you guys getting involved in all that as well? Or is that kind of spread across different teams, those categories?
Yeah, so the way that I work is definitely on like positioning in terms of messaging and how are we presenting this product, but I also do a lot of market research. I do
Hmm.
a lot of interviewing. I talk with customers and prospects. I try to at least once a day, have at
Yeah.
least one meeting where I'm talking about like the problems that we're solving for you,
Hmm.
or what they actually want our product to do. And then,
Right.
of course, like product launches. So, like go to market strategy. How are we launching our features? Especially like if we have a tier one launch, how are we then making sure that this is amplified across our demand gen team, our content team, make sure our sales is posting on LinkedIn for some type of like amplification of an organic
Hmm.
campaign for product launches.
Hmm.
So it's really a lot of different verticals, I would say. Um, but I think that those three are probably the biggest. So research, positioning, and go to market strategy.
Yeah, I think those are the big ones for sure. But I guess like the question is like, why is it such a big issue for all these SaaS brands? Because I mean, you see it all the time, messaging that's just really hard to get clear because, frankly, at least from the perspective that I have around all the companies we work with, sometimes their products are just really hard. There's a lot of complexity around them. And so sometimes it's very hard to simplify. Or if you're in a multi-product situation, then you've got all this stuff you want to say. And sometimes it's difficult for people to say, well, it's not really just this one thing. It kind of does all these things. And then they try to vomit all that stuff on a page or in an ad, and then it just kind of lays a little flat. But what's your take there?
Yeah, messaging is hard, and it's one of those things that I have put out. I've put out messaging before that absolutely did not land.
Yeah.
So within some of these interviews that I do, I actually have customers or prospects look at the messaging of like
Hmm.
our landing pages or like how we are positioning a product.
Right.
Um, and one person told me that our landing page reminded him of dead bodies. And I was like, well, now I have to redo our whole
How
homepage.
does that happen? Dead bodies. I mean, did you guys have an abstraction of a dead body? Was it some weird pun or something? I mean,
Oh my God. I don't even remember like what the
that's
actual
funny.
message said, but the second he said that, I was like, we're changing our whole
Oh my
positioning
gosh, that's
strategy.
hilarious. That's hilarious.
Um, so it's really getting feedback. And the most direct way that I've found is physically bringing up your homepage and being like, do you understand what I am selling?
Right.
And do you understand the value of this? And if the answer is it reminds me of dead bodies, you then need to do a new exercise with your team.
I like it. The dead body exercise. I think we need to post on that tomorrow or something like that. That's great. Yeah, I mean, I agreed. I mean, but I guess what was this? You said a message didn't land. I'm curious. Like, why didn't it land? How do you know that? Was that just because of doing that exact thing you just said, sitting down with the customer and they're like, man, what the hell is on your page? I mean, what was it?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And then something that I do really often is I'm listening to a lot of our sales calls. So we use Gong. So any type
Yep.
of like call recording software that you have, I'm always listening to the way that sales is explaining what our product does, but
Hmm.
also the way that prospects are explaining what they want our product to do or like the problem that
Right.
they want our product to solve. I am here because I have a pipeline problem. I am here
Right.
because I have this inefficient outbound motion and I don't know how to scale it. And then you understand that this is how people are talking about your product, and then try
Hmm.
using that. And I work really closely with our demand gen leader of letting him know like how are people describing our product, and then we run a lot of ads based on that, and then we kind
Hmm.
of just see how it works.
Hmm.
We see what our
Hmm.
click-through rates end up looking like, we see if like anything is converting, and then
Hmm.
we'll just kind of nix it. We're
Hmm.
really I would say agile about ad creation and then testing.
Totally, totally, 100%. And you have to be. I mean, I think some of this stuff, and ultimately, I like that you're using like leading indicators. It's not always just about conversion, right? Because I'm sure you guys have campaigns that are targeting people that are cold, that haven't heard about UserGems before, or maybe forgot about it, right? They haven't been to your website in 6 months plus, or whatever it may be. And so you're not necessarily expecting them to go to the page and immediately say, "Cool, yep, I'm ready, let's do it," right? You're expecting them to say, "Okay, cool. Like, did they engage with the ad number one? Did they click on it? And so is the click through rate high?" And then you might look on time on page. Will they spending any time there? Are they moving around? Like, what are they actually doing there? Because that's important. Because ultimately, we're trying to educate them, not just convert them immediately. Now, sure, if someone's more familiar, if they're in market, then you're of course expecting people to say, "Cool, I'm ready to go." So, yeah, I totally agree there. So on the point of one thing that always comes up, and we do this internally too, and it was kind of the example of what I did on LinkedIn a little bit, going back to that grid where we try to organize things into general themes. Now, some people may have more themes, different things they want to say, blah blah blah. It changes, right? It's never the same. But how do you guys actually practically organize that? Because I think that's difficult for some people, and maybe it's a messy spreadsheet. If it is, I'd love to know like kind of what it looks like, or maybe we could even share some notes because I think a lot of people always ask me like, how do you organize that information, especially for campaigns on ads? But you're also thinking about this not just from an ads perspective. You're thinking about this from how do we make sure sales is singing the same tune, talking about the product in the same way, the core capabilities they're looking for, and all that. So where do you put it all? Is it organized? Does it look beautiful, or is it messy all over the place?
I would like to say that it's beautiful and in one spot, but it's really not. And I think
Yeah,
it might help understand like the way that we organize our like product messaging and our positioning.
yeah,
And the way that we segment this is based on persona.
okay.
And we at UserGems have three different main personas. We sell to sales leaders, we sell to marketing leaders, and we sell to revenue operations leaders.
Yep.
And those three different leaders have very different problems and they care about very different things.
Hmm.
And we call them the three musketeers. And I wish that we had one buyer persona because it would make my life so much easier, but we don't.
Amen.
So essentially, what we've recently done is we revamped our personas by doing a lot of interviewing. Like I said again, I do a lot of speaking to people in market research. And a common problem that like everyone has is I have a pipeline problem, or
Hmm.
like I mentioned, some type of like revenue growth target misses.
Right.
Um, and the way that we started this research off was just being like, what problem does UserGem solve for you? And
Hmm.
they'll say something like, oh, I have more qualified leads. And then
Hmm.
you're like, okay, but like, why does that matter to you? Like, why does
Hmm.
having more qualified leads matter to you? And then we'll get into something like, oh, well, then we get more qualified meetings. Okay, what does that matter to you?
Hmm.
Okay, then we have faster sales cycles and higher ARR and like whatever. So we used that. And then what I did was with our sales leader is we put it in like a spreadsheet. So it went through like a
Hmm.
bunch of spreadsheets, and then that went into a Google Doc presentation, and then that went into two different things. It is changing the way that we sell. So
Hmm.
it's changing the way our discovery calls are structured.
Hmm.
Because we have better questions and better like pain points and better ideas of problems that we solve for these different buyers. But I also have then presented it to our marketing team and said,
Hmm.
like, this is the way that someone else talks about our problem or like our product or our solution. Put this in an ad and like see if it works.
Hmm.
And those are all on like a Google sheet or like a
Yeah.
presentation form, Megan the
Yeah.
marketer or
Yeah.
whatever you want to call them.
Sure.
And I think that's the best delivery that we
Yeah.
found so far. So it doesn't really need to
Cool.
be like crazy complex.
No, no. In fact, it should be simple, right? Because the more complex it is, the more difficult it is to maintain, scale, and all that stuff, or help people understand what in the world you did, right? Do you guys break it down into, say, for example, you've got your sales persona, and then you say, okay, cool. These are the five or three or two or whatever it is features they really care about. Here's what they actually do, the capability of the feature, right? Because no one cares about the widget per se. Here's the problem it ultimately solves, and so on and so forth, and kind of break it down a little bit further because you might have some ads, for example, that are more picking on the problem, right, and teasing that out a bit, or you might have ads that are just kind of right straight to the point, like boom, this is what it does. Allows you to get job alerts when someone switches a job. Period. That's what it allows you to do. Wouldn't that be cool if you had that? Because then you could reach out to that person done down the road, right? That'd be more kind of capability focused. Do you guys go that far, or is that still overcomplicated for y'all?
Yeah, it still might be a little bit overcomplicated, but I would say, like in terms of our ads, they do exactly what you said. Like we either tell you like the solution in
Right.
someone else's words,
Right.
or we say like this is a problem that I know that you have. Like, do you have this problem? I
Yeah.
know you do because I talked to 10 other leaders that are exactly
Right.
like you, and they all have this problem.
Exactly.
But I will say like it gets a little bit more complex when you're doing this type of like messaging for sales teams because the way that we structure that is like you have a challenge and then you have like a list of questions like, do you have this challenge? Like, I have
Mm.
another customer who also leads demand gen at this
Mm.
company. And before he bought UserGems, he had this problem. And then these are all of the things that now he has done to solve this problem. And then he
Right.
got a promotion. He exceeded his targets. He, whatever the hero story is for sales that like kind of connects the dots.
Right. Exactly. Totally. Have you ever found that there's like one capability that ultimately people are looking for where they're saying like, hey, this is the one thing they always come in for. Every time I get on a freaking phone call, they're always talking about this one thing because I think that'd be a really interesting insight for you because there's always the products can do tons of different stuff, right? But there's usually 20% or 10% of it even that ultimately drives the initial interest. And I wondered if you guys through testing have kind of figured that out, or if that's something that you guys focus on for maybe each of the personas, like sales, man, we got to talk about this, marketing, this, so on and so forth. Or is it more just a, hey, we're just kind of moving stuff around, we're saying different stuff, like everyone's kind of got a little bit of a different need, and there's not like one thing or a couple of things about the product they're looking for.
Yeah, I will say most people know us for champion tracking.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the times our prospects are really siloed into this use case. So the one I would say like value prop is, or like problem that people have is tracking my champions manually is not scalable. And
Mm-hmm.
I would like to tap into this existing channel
Mm-hmm.
or a new channel. So then I think it's kind of like this manual tracking of champions doesn't scale is for all of our buyers,
Sure.
but the reason that it's valuable is different based on persona. So like
Got
marketing
it.
is looking for a new channel. Like I need a new channel because my existing
Right.
channels aren't enough. Whereas like
Right.
sales leaders are like my team isn't booking enough meetings, like, or it's taking too long to book a meeting, or it's taking too much of my team's bandwidth to break into an account. This would be great if we could scale tracking champions. So I think
Yeah.
that piece is what we found is common across all of our buyers, but the reason they care about it is a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I bring it up because I back when Colin, if he was the director, headed a management over at Clearbit for a while, and they used to lead a lot with their intent data, and not just intent data, but the firmographic data that connects like personal emails and work emails, so you can do Facebook targeting. And they used to push that a lot as the front end type of product, and Clearbit has lots of different products, but that was the one they led with a lot because they knew that a lot of people ended up starting with that product first and then they expanded into others. And so they focused a lot of their advertising dollars. Now, this is some months ago, so this has maybe changed, but they focused a lot of their advertising dollars and not just ads, but also other types of campaigns outside of paid on that one thing. And I think that's so interesting once you can get to that insight, because then you really can say, okay, cool, maybe sure it's a few other things too, but they'll learn about those things along the way, maybe on the website or through sales calls or whatever it may be. But the thing that gets them in that they always ask us about is XYZ. And if we can really focus on that and make sure they know us for this one thing, then they're not going to think about any other vendor for that. They're going to be like UserGems. They do champion tracking. Boom. If we need it, we go to UserGems, and then of course you guys do other stuff, right? And then that's where you can come in and say, hey, boom, it's not just that; it's actually all these other things.
Yeah, but then also what ends up happening with that is you're so pigeonholed into this one thing that you do that
Hmm.
by the time a buyer knows that you do something else, it's a lot harder to
Hmm.
make them interested.
That's interesting.
It's kind of something that I'm personally struggling with is like, how do we uh, change our messaging or like the positioning of our
Hmm.
product to not only be known for like champion tracking, but
Right.
also like buyers who are changing roles into your target accounts that you don't know about yet, who
Right.
are still really great leads. Like how do we message those both together? And that is
Right.
something that if anyone knows the answer, please message it to me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think there is one. I mean, ultimately, and I don't know what we always do too with a lot of clients too is just thinking. And of course, I speak always more from a paid lens. Is in a retargeting campaign, there may be that one thing like I'm talking about, or maybe it's two, whatever the number is. But the point is, you have a combination of different capabilities or things that the product can do. You've got social proof backing that up and other things like that, and so maybe people are not ready right now, but they're hearing multiple things like, oh shit, it does champion tracking. That's really cool. Oh, wow, I can do this other thing with the data set they have and so on and so forth. And right. And then, all those things kind of culminate together to like, oh my God, we need this thing because it can do all these things. And so, I think there's those types of plays too, where you're not trying to your point, pigeonhole yourself. But in terms of like the lead ad, a lot of times we find that if you lead and start to be known for one thing, especially in the early stage, it ends up helping a lot more. But yeah, to your point, it gets difficult as you expand out because then people don't want to. You don't just want to be known for the one thing, right? So. Yeah, it makes sense. So I wanted to pull back. I mentioned this before. This is talked about all the time on LinkedIn, and the benefits versus features, and this is and that's right. And so I mentioned it a little bit before, and I think we've kind of talked about it. But I wanted to get a little bit deeper to see if you guys ever struggled with this before. But it's when you're like you land on a landing page or a home page, or you see an ad, and it's 100% just focused on the outcome. And you were mentioning that earlier, right? Like maybe some of the salespeople they care about driving more leads, more qualified meetings, and you can ask more questions to get to that answer. And so I think the same thing's true is that, yeah, ultimately, like, yeah, every freaking B2B SaaS company, they want pipeline of revenue, no doubt, right? But, for that to be believable, we need to have some backing and understanding of that. And I was curious, do you have that same feeling or do you have a different take in terms of leading with benefit oriented messaging? Because I think a lot of times that comes in from a CEO or CFO from the company that says, you know what, screw all this capability stuff and this feature and talking about what it does. We just need to let people know it drives more pipeline. That's it, because that's what they care about. And I think it's a dangerous road. I mean, both are important, clearly, but what's your take? Do you disagree on that, or do you guys think about it differently?
No, I totally agree with you. And like the true sentiment of it is no one wants to be feature dumped on,
Yeah,
because they don't care. Like if you at this
exactly.
point, in any type of like B2B SaaS sales cycle, you are selling to the CFO of that company. And the
Hmm.
CFO of that company does not care how your software integrates with Salesforce, or, like what types of like manual processes it's eliminating for the team. They don't care.
Right,
They're looking at this as terms of like a cost and ROI perspective. So
right.
having some sort of benefit, but also social proof and also like customer story sentiment, and just having that type of something that helps UserGems out a lot is we are very like visible on LinkedIn, whether it's internal of our own team talking about the benefits that UserGems has, or our customers or customer
Mm,
stories. And I think that really does help,
mm.
more so than just kind of like talking about what features you have, because those in itself just don't actually matter.
Yeah. Do you think there's ever a difference between the people that actually come in inbound, which are maybe not the CEO and CFO, but maybe they're more a lower level person in the organization? Do you think there's situations where a message that was more about the capability versus the benefit might resonate better? Or do you go through those exercises at all?
I think it really depends. And that's actually an exercise we did with our personas of like, for example, our more data driven, like revenue operations folks, more into this like nitty gritty analytical, like, how does this work?
Yeah.
And whereas like marketing and sales is maybe more about like the benefits. And
Right.
it did not correlate. I think it's
Mhm.
you kind of have to have both approaches, and
Mm.
figure out like how that person actually thinks through solving a problem.
Right.
And it's more so based on that rather than like the buyer themselves.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, because I think what you said makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of times when we're working with companies, everyone wants to target the decision maker typically because they're the person that signs the check. But then we forget that a lot of times the decision maker, whoever that is, the CEO, CFO, whoever ends up signing, ultimately has delegated that task down to someone else, or it's really someone else's problem. And so many times the person that's out there trying to solve a specific job or problem is looking for a capability or, I mean, at the end of the day, a feature, but no one looks for a feature. They're looking for something that it actually does. They're trying to do something, right? Track champions across the journey when they leave companies. They want to know stuff like that. I might be poorly pitching UserGems, by the way, but that's always been my understanding of UserGems. And so I think that there's like that, type of differentiation there that I think it's sometimes a little bit mixed up in messaging where we just want to put all the heat all behind like, benefit, all these cool things it can do. And like all that is important, right? Because you're not going to get the deal done without it. Because ultimately, sometime in the sales cycle, that CEO, CFO, whoever that person's going to sign is going to have to get involved and say, hey, cool, what's this thing going to do? Is it going to actually help us meet some of our business goals for later this year? And if so, like how much does it cost and how long is it going to take? And if the answers are all good, then of course they're going to move forward. But ultimately, the person at the beginning is looking for exactly what it can do. But you have a different take on that? Do you agree? Because that's what we see a lot with a lot of clients we talk with.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I think it's kind of like a fine line between how much of the intricacies of how this work do I share.
Yeah.
And at what point during like, because top of funnel, you don't really want to get into like how this actually works.
Hmm.
But it could be an interesting though, now that I'm thinking through it, like a test to see if that would be interesting,
Hmm.
and see how it lands. So maybe let me take that one and we'll see how it
I
goes.
love it. I love it. Yeah, let me know. Let me know. Well, that leads into a good question then. I mean, in terms of like some campaigns you guys have run, whether it be something that someone's not aware of, anything you guys have recently done with either like a new feature, capability, use case, or something like that that you guys recently did a cool product marketing launch on that maybe we've missed, or maybe kind of walk through like how you guys thought about it and what channels you promoted it on and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So we recently started to kind of get more in depth with a organized launch plan. We're a startup, like very early stage
Totally.
startup, Series A.
Yep.
So launches are not like Google level where they're, very well thought out and
Yep.
planned. Um, so one of our most recent launches was basically like an entire UI that could also be live in your Salesforce that tracks all of your past buyers and all of your other relevant contacts within these accounts, and then we rank them on most likely to buy.
Oh, cool.
So, like as a sales rep, you can come into one of your accounts in Salesforce and say, "Okay, here's 20 relevant people to me ranked by who's most likely to convert based on my opportunity data that UserGems already is analyzing within my CRM." Because a
Hmm.
lot of what we see is the problem is people get like decision paralysis, especially like a BDR or an SDR who's like, I don't even know how to break into this account. So the
Mm-hmm.
problem we're solving is we're going to make it really easy and tell you like these 5 people are more likely to respond to you. So maybe start there.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that we did this launch was on a few different channels. So we used all organic for this. Like we didn't use any type of like paid campaigns.
Cool.
We did like TikTok style videos that we've been trying out off for LinkedIn. Um, we have tried it on TikTok before, but we actually just kind of record them on TikTok and then put them on LinkedIn.
Right.
And those are actually really easy to edit and well received.
Who
We
records
do
those? Who records those? Do you guys, or do you like outsource that, or how do you do it?
no, we are, it's just us.
Is it you? Is it you doing it?
It is
I'll have to look.
it is me.
Is
Yeah.
it you? Oh, I'm gonna have to
I'm
look for. I'm gonna have to find these.
yeah, I am our resident TikToker.
There you
Our
go.
resident like want to be Gen Z, but not.
I love
Uh,
it.
Yeah, so me and then our head of demand gen actually he started to also
Hmm.
Isaac Ware started to make some too
Hmm.
non-product related ones, but just in terms of like top of funnel.
Right.
And yeah, so we love the videos, and then we also get our whole team involved. So Amber, who we were talking about earlier, that connected us. She when she started at UserGem, she got our whole team posting on LinkedIn. Like, I don't even think I posted on LinkedIn before I started working here.
Right.
So she's really enabled the team of like, here's how we're going to put like take all of Justine's positioning and messaging of this product, and we're going to create all of these different posts with all of these different videos or content, and
Right.
we're all going to post it on the same day. And it's going to be like our launch day, and we're going to make a lot
Hmm.
of noise about this on LinkedIn. And that's like a really great organic social way just to get people seeing this release and talking about it and
Hmm.
sharing it. Um, and we get a lot of people coming inbound that are like, "Oh, I saw you on LinkedIn," or like, "I just saw someone talking to you in a comment on a post." Like it's
Hmm.
our social, like organic social, is very strong in our sales cycle. From what we just anecdotally from what we hear.
Hmm. Was it hard getting everyone involved to start posting and whatnot, or how was that? Because I feel like that's constantly a struggle for everyone. Everyone's like, ah, we need the CEO and everyone and all the sales reps and everyone to post, and everyone just ends up like taking links to the blog and just reposting it. And I feel like sometimes there's a lack of kind of going just a little bit further. Have you guys struggled with that, or has that been pretty easy always for y'all?
It's so hard.
Yeah.
And I will take ownership of it, is it's hard to get me to post content too. And I know how important it is.
Right.
But something that we do, and I do not know how Amber does it, is she can crank out content and like examples of posts. And it's
Uh-huh.
so easy of just like, please enter 2 lines of your experience with this. And then
Right.
here's post inspiration.
That's cool.
And then we also have, like if you want to build your personal brand on LinkedIn, like we offer a space for that internally. So that's something else that our that Amber, who is our head of content or our head
Right.
of social, runs.
Right. That's so important. I mean, honestly, it's how we've grown OmniLab for the most part. I mean, a lot of organic content that what we'll do is we'll use combination now thought leader ads or purposed organic posts. There's a lot of our ads actually that just make sure that, because organically, that you're not getting in front of everyone that's a perfect fit for your ICP. It's free is the biggest benefit, but uh, minus the time it takes to actually write the post and get it all out there and whatnot. But the benefit is then you can kind of put some horsepower on it behind it. And then you've got still kind of the same thing, right? You still got same old good old fashioned text based post or video or whatever it is, but now going directly to your ICP. But yeah, it'd be great to see more people kind of get on that train. There's still so few that I feel like I've really done it, which is why it's so easy to be in the top 1% of creators on LinkedIn because literally all you got to do is like post. I think it's once or twice a week to be in the 1%. Maybe it's changed now because more people are doing it, but it's still not much. It's a very low number. And so you think about all those other people that are like passively just kind of lurking, not liking, not commenting or stuff, but they're seeing you. They're like, oh, cool. I saw that Justine girl. She's like the famous TikToker from UserGems. Right. And so now you start seeing that, I'm sure, in some of your forums or they mentioned it on sales calls. Like, yeah, I keep seeing your videos pop up. Your guys are all over LinkedIn. And so that's the type
Yeah.
of stuff that's crazy.
Yeah. I think another good thing is like, in terms of positioning of getting your team to post on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
What is in it for me? We do
exactly.
like some type of incentives, like for the most posts or most engagement or like whatever.
Right.
And then something else is like our sales team gets recognition, like in both senses. So like our SDRs book more meetings because they're more like visible on LinkedIn and people
Mm.
are noticing
Hmm.
and talking. So that helps with their commission. So kind of talking about it that way and not of like, please post on LinkedIn to help our social presence. More so like,
Yeah.
please post on LinkedIn because you could hit your quota this month if more people see you and are aware.
Exactly, exactly. 100%. Well, that and it's also just good. Maybe the stuff you don't want to publicize is it's good for them in general because the more visible they are as a person, right? The more they're going to be sought after, right? And so no one expects them necessarily to spend the rest of their lives at user gyms. Hopefully they stay there for a while,
Yeah.
but growing an audience and being known for being really good at sales, marketing, product marketing, whatever is a great thing for them long term anyway, for however long they're user gyms and whatever the world looks like in the future. So,
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
why the personal brand aspect is like not about user gems, like just
Sure.
how to make your best self on LinkedIn for whatever you choose to do afterwards.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, I like that. I wanted to wrap up on two little things that we can kind of get out of here. But one thing was that always comes up, or at least from the sales and marketing side, is always alignment. Everyone's always talking about sales and marketing aren't aligned, and I know you guys are a small team, right? So maybe it's not as much of an issue, but even in small teams, I see it all the time. I don't know what they're doing over there. I don't even know what the target account list is for sales. I'm not even sure where it is. They don't know where it is. No one knows where it is, and so marketing's not aligned to the same accounts. Stuff like that happens all the time. But in the product marketing world, given it's just you, how do you kind of wrap everyone together? Do you guys have any cadence? Is there any flow? Anything that you do differently that maybe kind of keeps everything tied together? Given the fact that you're owning product marketing world and you need to make sure sales, marketing, and really everyone is kind of singing the same tune. How do you go about that? And are there any struggles like you've kind of come across?
Yeah, I think the sales and marketing alignment at UserGem specifically is really strong. We're very lucky, as you mentioned, we're still very small, but that's something
Right.
that we actually talk about a lot, even with our
Hmm.
customers, specifically because UserGems as a product uh, needs to be used by both sales and marketing team to have the best effect. So if
Right.
someone's sales and marketing teams are not aligned, like we spend a lot of time coaching on sales and marketing alignment.
Right.
With product marketing, also loop in the product team. So now you kind of have like these three
Hmm.
circles of sales, marketing, and product, and then I'm really in the middle of it.
Hmm.
And in terms of like cadences with marketing, I sit under the marketing team. A PMM role can sit under product or marketing, but at
Hmm.
UserGems, I sit under marketing. And we meet like weekly and I
Hmm.
talk about like what conversations I'm having in the market. What am I learning from
Hmm.
sales calls? Like what am I learning from customers in terms of like how we're helping them?
Hmm.
What do people like? What do they not like?
Yeah.
Um, with sales, it's a little bit less frequent,
Hmm.
more so around like launching and making sure they're aligned on what features we're launching and like what type of competitor intel is important.
Hmm.
So that's another really huge thing of just like how do our product releases or our new features, how do they help us compete in this market, and like what makes this now different when we're selling to our prospects.
Right.
So that's a little
Right.
less frequent, but it's still really important, especially with things like win loss analysis and making sure that
Totally.
sales and marketing and product are all aligned on like why are we winning, but also why are we losing deals, and figuring
Right.
out together like how like what types of priorities do we want to have over the next 3 months to rectify like a couple of these findings.
Totally. It's a huge win loss analysis are hugely important. And the other thing you made me think about too is I was recently reading April Dunford's new book that she launched. I don't know if you follow her at all, but she launched this book called Sales Pitch recently. And it's all about a little bit to a degree the disconnect between sometimes product marketing and the positioning side of the house and ultimately what the pitch is to the customer. And so sometimes what happens is, either the sales reps aren't trained properly or the deck hasn't really been redesigned and or the pitch narrative, et cetera, hasn't been really redesigned and connected into what product marketing's saying. And so sometimes you get these weird worlds where the website's doing an awesome job and kicking ass because marketing, owns that, right? And so therefore, obviously, things should hopefully be a little more aligned. And then you go to the sales side, and sometimes what's actually being said to a customer is not quite the same thing as what's on the website, more so related to the way that the product's positioned against other competitors and other people are out there in the market. And I think to your point, you kind of brought it up. So it sounds like you guys have these discussions a bit in terms of like competitor intel and whatnot. But it's not just about competitors, right? It's also about just like, hey, what are the things that make UserGems a better fit for any other company, and making sure that everyone's aligned. And so I really like the book. You should read it if you haven't looked at it. But anything you guys do there specifically that you'd add that kind of keeps those things kind of together? Like who owns the sales deck, or is that you, or is that just someone else in marketing that kind of has those discussions in terms of positioning and how the sales team's actually, talking to an inbound lead, or how does that work?
Yeah, so in terms of PMM and sales, something that I'm trying not to do is become like a one-stop shop for one pagers and decks. You can
Said
get
every marketer.
you can
Exactly.
get really, really stuck in this role if you're just cranking out one pagers
So true.
for sales. And a one pager is not going to sell your product.
I don't know
Um,
why do they want the one pager? I'm not sure. I've never really understood that. I was in sales before I was in marketing. I'm not sure what the one pager does, but yeah, what
I
is
don't
it?
know, but I got very lucky because our VP of marketing, our sales team very early on would ask for one pagers, and she goes, send them to the website because what you're asking for is on our website. We're not creating a bunch of one pagers for you.
Exactly.
Um, but
That's funny.
in terms of like decks, that is also on our sales team. I'm not creating decks. What I
Hmm.
am creating though is something like the persona research of like these are the things we are going to put in the deck
Right.
because of this research that has already been done.
Right.
But our sales process is really like discovery based and data focused. So thankfully, we don't have to show a lot of like manual, like technical demos.
Right.
So I'm very lucky in that sense.
You are lucky in that sense. That's awesome. Yeah, it's so funny about the one pager stuff. It's so true. It's what everyone like marketer hates. Like, oh god, another freaking one pager, another new deck. Why do you need all this stuff? Like, just and frankly, honestly, what we've been moving for, we have a deck, like at least for OmniLab, but we never really use it because I just find that a lot of times on the first call, and we don't have a demo or product behind us, right? We're offering a service, but I just find that like having just a conversation with someone and sharing your approach and how you think about things or a couple of insights you're seeing from other companies is way more valuable than saying, all right, slide one. We were born in 1792 and we're 14 people and so on and so forth. It's like, who cares, right? Just kind of get into it and like, let's like talk like as if we're working together. And so I find that works well. But well, cool. Last thing, real quick. Any product marketing? Any companies that are killing it on product marketing that you follow that you like? That you're like, oh my gosh, we need to up our game with XYZ company because they are absolutely murdering it. Anyone like that you kind of like that we should look out for?
Yeah. Yeah. So, like in terms of maybe not a company, but I really love following Jason Oakley, and he also has
Ah, oh,
like,
it's great stuff.
yeah, he has this great newsletter that I subscribe to.
Yeah.
Um, and I would just recommend if anyone's interested in like any type of product positioning, PMM, like even
Mm.
on the demand gen side, I think it would be really helpful. But one of my favorite companies that I idolize for PMM is Wistia, and
Mm. It's a good one.
they're video marketing. So maybe it's a little bit hard to compare because they are a video marketing tool.
Right.
But they have these awesome product release videos.
Yeah.
But not only like do they have these really great spotlights that are really well done, but the way they talk about their releases is very like clean on their
Yeah.
blog. So I think it's a huge miss on a lot of teams, like including myself
Hmm.
sometimes, to get to the point, and to kind of stop using all of this jargon of this intricacies of this feature because no one cares and no,
Right.
that's not going to sell it. Um, but I also really like what ChatGPT did recently. I don't know
Hmm.
if you saw it, but they released Dolly,
Oh
Dolly
yeah.
3, I think it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but the way that they released it was they didn't talk about the features or like what it does at all. They showed like a mother. If you don't know what Dolly is, it's basically like
Yeah.
ChatGPT makes these images. So
Hmm.
you can say like, for example, in the video, she's like, my 5-year-old really likes hedgehogs and keeps talking about a hedgehog with sunflowers. And like ChatGPT will then make you a little hedgehog and like tell you a little bedtime story about it. And like,
Right.
I don't have kids, but I was just like, this is so sweet and charming. And I would love
Hmm.
to be able to use this. And it almost makes me want to pay for ChatGPT. So they almost
Right.
just converted me, and maybe will, into a buyer because I just really liked that video and I thought it was really cool. And I actually kind of don't know what it does beyond that, um, but that they are potentially going to get a new customer from it. And I'm sure they're getting
Yeah.
a lot of adoption just from that video.
I'd argue that you kind of do know what it does because I mean, like
Yeah.
that to me is a great thing because the context is there, right? And so it's like getting right into it. I think Descript actually does a pretty good, decent job of this from a product marketing perspective. They've got some really cool TikTok style videos, and their ads are very simple, talking about very simple things you can do and whatnot. But they actually show you. They're like, yeah, you know how you got lots of ums and ahs in your podcast? Yeah, delete those. Here's how you do it. You go, oh shit, like it's the unlock, right? Versus if I were just to say it, you might not put the whole thing together. So I think the context around this stuff is always key. Otherwise, things just kind of sit out there and never land. And that's why, again, with the benefit messaging, sometimes leading with that can create a bit of confusion. Like, yeah, of course I want to drive pipeline, but how in the world do you think we're going to do that with your product that I have no clue what it does? And so yeah, going back to that thing that you wanted to test that you guys haven't done so much, but well, cool. I love this chat. This was great. Anything we didn't cover that you think's like really important on the product marketing side, or some things that maybe you've learned, or anything like that that you're like, man, why didn't he ask me about that?
No, I think just something that I would mention is just to work with your PMM if you have one.
Hmm.
If you don't have one, which a lot of companies probably maybe don't, depending on what stage they're at, customer success or sales could be a really great place to start from the demand gen side. So like a lot of the research that I'm talking about that I'm doing with just talking with customers and prospects, sales and CS does every day anecdotally. So
Hmm.
even just picking their brains or looking at a call recording tool if you have one and watching some of these discovery calls and seeing how people talk about their problems and talk about the value that your
Hmm.
product brings. And then test it on ads. Our head of demand gen and I will like sit on a call sometimes and just like hammer out a bunch of like ad copy ideas, but you don't necessarily need a PMM to make that part happen. So, I mean, figuring out like how to work better with your sales and CS teams could really spark some ideas in terms of top of funnel.
Agreed, because sales is sitting there every day talking to hopefully lots of different people, and so if there's anyone to talk to, it's them, and or listen to gong calls. I always kind of I find it better just to talk with them on the side too a little bit, right? Listening to gong calls all day long is cool, but sometimes just going in there, actually getting on the call even with them, or having a little side conversations to aggregate some information up and get their thoughts on it is super valuable. So love it. Well, people wanted to find you. I assume you're extremely active on LinkedIn. You'll be world famous TikToker in approximately 1 month. So, the best place to follow you, LinkedIn, I guess.
Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. Please don't find me on TikTok. Kidding.
Unfollow right
uh,
now.
no, but yeah, LinkedIn's the best spot. I'm doing better with posting some of our content, so it'll help motivate me as well.
I love it. I love it. Well, thanks for jumping on, and I'm sure we'll chat in the ecosphere of LinkedIn at some point. So,
Yeah, awesome. This was fun. It's
all
great
right.
talking to you.
Cheers.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of OmniLab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of OmniLab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode, or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website, that's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode, where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.